Okay, let me clarify a couple of points on this drawing before I go on, and that is, I want to stress the importance of, at the beginning when you're looking at the chair, you can't just draw any box below your eye level, right? You have to look at the chair. You have to determine exactly how your chair is turned and positioned before you even visualize the box. So the chair comes first. You're looking at the chair, seeing where you are in relation to the near corner, seeing exactly where your eye level is. These angles that I'm drawing, they're not just any old angles. Those are, what I'm meaning is that those are the angles that I'm actually seeing in real life, and how this chair is positioned relative to me. How much of this side I'm seeing versus how much of that side I'm seeing. I've got to draw, or I've got to imagine the box so that it conforms to that, right? I just can't draw this from imagination. I'm meaning to sort of say that this drawing is duplicating how I'm seeing the position of my chair. I just want to be clear about that. So these angles, all these angles become important. The main thing I wanted to try to get across with this drawing was that these lines, the angles and so forth are based on observation, what I'm looking at. But what perspective gives us is the sense that these are all related, they're unified, they're connected. So the B lines are connected to one another. They're doing the same thing. They're converging. The A lines are connected with one another. They're vertical and they're parallel. So there's that underlying unity that's there that I want you to be able to take advantage of. The other thing I'll say about this drawing is that you'll notice that some of the lines in your chair and in your drawing are going to be literal perspective lines. And by that I mean, like the front of the seat is an actual line that you can follow, along the edge of that seat. And that's a perspective line. There are other perspective lines that are implied, that are where we have two symmetrical horizontal points in space. There's an implied perspective line. So in other words, where the legs come down here and sit, and where this leg comes down here and sits. So these are symmetrical points down here. They're not actually connected by any line that I see, but there's an implied line because they're symmetrical points. Like if we see this chair from the front, those 2 points are going to be sitting at the same place in space, right? So this point is symmetrical with this one. This one is symmetrical with this one. This one's symmetrical with this one. So from here to here, there's an implied perspective line. There's not an actual one. It'd be the same thing if I built an arm to this chair. All right. So this point. So if I built an arm for this chair, like arms for this chair. So this point, where this changed direction from here to here, that would be symmetrical with this point, and those would line up with a perspective line. Those would be implied perspective lines, like where the bend in the arm were. Those are the same points in space horizontally, or they're on the same level. Same thing with here, like where they enter the chair, where they meet the chair over here. Those are symmetrical points in space, and there's an implied perspective line. So when you divide something in half, anything that's symmetrical, those points have an implied perspective line between them, right? So it'd be the same thing if this was a curve. If this, instead of sort of being square, if this was curved and it went like this, what I would want to do is determine like the apex of the curve, and that would be a symmetrical point in space. So where there's a bend, if I find, I have to kind of visualize where the starting point of that curve, or where the apex of the curve is, and see that as having an implied perspective line between it. Okay, let's go to the other chair, which was that your eye level was between the top and the bottom. So let's say we look at that chair and it's sort of situated in the same way. The bottom of the chair, anything that anything that has sort of 4 legs on it, it's good to just sort of draw that, draw all 4 legs as if they're in perspective, and to draw the box that connects the feet of that chair, because those are perspective lines that we want to make sense of, those implied perspective lines. So what people were having trouble with here was the top. So here, if this is my eye level here, here's my near corner. These lines are moving uphill. So again, my B lines all sort of moving uphill like this and converging. And as I approach my eye level, all of those B lines are starting to level out. Because at my eye level, that B line would just be a horizontal. And then my C lines here, all converging. So I've got to, and just watch, there's a tendency as you come up the object to sort of forget about the angle of the line down at the very bottom. So I can't have these lines diverge. So in other words, this line, it can't go like this. It can't diverge from this one. If that happens, what that means is that I'm making the back line bigger than the front line, and that's the opposite of what we want to happen. So you've got to keep all these lines in your mind's eye as you're drawing them, and make sure that all of them are converging. Now up top here, this line up top here, since this is above my eye level, it has to go downhill, right? Because from the near corner, lines move downhill to get to my eye level. So a lot of you were still making this line sort of do what these lines are doing, but that's not the case because that's above my eye level, so it has to move downhill instead of uphill, right? And then, anything, again, like any detail has to conform to the perspective of the plane that it's on, So if you have, if you have spokes or whatever it is, whatever you add to the chair, you have to make sure that you understand how that detail is relating to the perspective of whatever it's sitting on, So say like down here, some of you had little joining members that sort of gave structure to the bottom of the chair and kind of strengthens the legs of the chair essentially. That they were different lines. All of those lines are related. Like all of these are C lines here. All of these are C lines going back. All of these going back here are B lines. You can't just sort of add stuff without seeing how it fits into an A, B, or C line situation. And again, the A, B, and C lines relate to that rectangular solid. A rectangular solid it's 4 sets of, or 3 sets, of 4 lines each. That's a rectangular solid. So those 3 line sets are the A, B, and C lines. So, and again, So let me do this one more time. Like if I have a curved sort of situation like this, it may not have been as clear on the last drawing that I did. So what I want to do is determine, okay, like along this curve here, maybe like where is it lowest? And then over here, where does that curve start? Or where is it at its apex? Like if it comes like this and then it goes back into the chair like that, where's its apex out there? Because those will be symmetrical points over here that will conform to perspective. So like these points over here, or the low point over here, since they're symmetrical, maybe the inward point over here, all of those, in order to make sense of that curve and perspective, I have to kind of, think about symmetrical points along that curve. And they won't sort of be there, with flashing red lights for you. You have to kind of visualize, you know, what are important sort of dips in that detail, in that curve, and can I imagine that as being a symmetrical point where there's a low point or where there's a high point. And all of those will have implied, not actual, but implied perspective lines that I can then line up and make sense of the curve that I'm seeing, okay? But the last thing I'll say is make this as simple for yourself as possible. You don't have to find a chair with curves. Try to avoid chairs that have slanted legs, you know, like a fold-out chair, you know, where the legs are kind of at like weird angles like that. Just do yourself a favor. Try to find a chair that is as box-like as possible, that you can most easily relate to that sort of stripped-down version of a chair that I gave you in the first video. And there doesn't have to be a lot of other detail to it. I'm mainly interested in seeing that you can sort of look at a chair in nature, relate it to a box that would be positioned that way in space, and then make sure that all the lines of the chair have a unified aspect to them in terms of those A, B, and C lines. And finally, again, just take those A, B, and C lines, take them out, take them past the edge of the actual object. Try to see how they're converging and relating properly with one another. Make sure they're all converging, not diverging, not parallel. Okay.